Thank you so much, everyone, for taking time out of your busy day to join us in this next installment of the Women in Tech series. I'm super excited about this session because I get to introduce two of my good friends whom I deeply respect and admire. But before we get into that, and I want to talk a little bit about, if you joined one of our previous sessions, you know that the tech sector sadly lags behind the rest of the job market when it comes to hiring women. As the percentage of employed women across all job sectors continued to grow over the last few years, 5 of the largest tech companies, Amazon, Apple, Facebook, Google, and Microsoft, still only had a workforce of about 34% women. As the start of 2020 kicked off, the numbers actually showed a little bit of progress was being made in terms of that representation of women, and it was slowly trending in the right direction. However, that all changed with COVID. So what I want to do is we really want to hear about that from one of our industry's best in tech, Traci Mercer. And as you might know, Traci, as the Senior Vice President of Sabre, leads the distribution strategy of multiple lines of business, indirect channels, third-party partnerships, and the lodging, ground, and sea sector. She provides the leadership and general management, developing and executing the overall strategy to align buyers and sellers while driving operational performance. This also includes negotiating enterprise-wide commercial contracts with supply partners that align with the unique sources of demand from both Sabre's agency base as well as their customer base. Maybe more importantly, not to discount any of that, but Traci is known as an active voice and leader in the travel industry for women's leadership development. She speaks on the topic often, as she's doing today, and is a founding member of the GBTA Strategic Advisory Board for Women in Travel. Her work has also been internationally recognized, having been named one of the top 50 most powerful women in tech 2020 by the National Diversity Council. She's also been named the 2019 Woman of Influence in Travel by GBTA, as well as one of the top 40 women in travel and a top 3 finalist for 2019's Global Business Travel Industries Woman of the Year. Outside of work, I don't know whether there's any time outside of all that, Traci enjoys volunteering and spending time with her husband and their English bulldogs. So it's an honor and a privilege to hand off to my colleague and friend, Annette Cumming, whom is a vice president at Deem, to actually conduct this interview with Traci. So I leave it to you, Annette. Thank you so much, Traci, for joining. And I'm really looking forward to listening to this.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mike. And Traci, it's so good to see you.
Nice to see you too, Annette. Thanks for taking the time to do this.
Absolutely. It's such a pleasure to be speaking with you and to hear Mike share your accomplishments again is amazing. You are an icon in our industry. So I'm just honored to be speaking with you today.
Well, thank you. I don't know about the icon thing, but I'm certainly noisy. So if that's what it takes, then I'm there.
I think we're going to talk a little bit about that today, about being noisy. So you've got a lot of insight to share. So let's before we dive in, though, Traci, I recently saw that you participated in the World Travel and Tourism Council Conference. So for people who don't know what that is, do you mind sharing a little bit about what they do and why that is important to you?
Sure. Well, I was really excited. The World Travel and Tourism Council actually was a hybrid event this year. So for many in our tourism industry, it was the first event the first international event that many people attended in person. I was a virtual member, and as I'm not fully vaccinated yet, not ready for international travel. However, I got to be a part of the stage. And what they did in Cancun this year was make a declaration towards a commitment globally for the travel and tourism industry for the advocacy, equality, and promotion of the need for women diversity in tourism. And so Sabre is honored to be a part of that, and I was honored to be one of the signing members and one of the advocates that were a part of that at the council.
Amazing. Amazing. That would have been a fun place to be in person.
I was really hoping that was going to be my first international trip. It just didn't work out.
Yeah. There'll be many more to come, I'm sure. So good. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's really important, and what a great organization.
Yes,
for advocacy. So let's jump into women in tech. So for you, Traci, when did you realize that you wanted to be in tech, and how did you make that happen?
At a pretty young age, I knew I wanted to be in tech. The joke my mom had was that I loved the cartoon The Jetsons. So I think between the flying cars and the robot maid, and you could sort of push a button and have anything you wanted at your fingertips. I was always pretty into that cartoon. So I think that's where my mom thought that maybe my desire for technology started. But in reality, in terms of how I made that happen, I had the benefit of growing up in the greater Seattle, Washington, USA area. And for those who don't know, this is also a pretty big tech hub. And at the time, it's the founding grounds of Microsoft. And Microsoft partnered with the school district that I went to, the public school district that I was involved in. And we had a pretty innovative program, and it was called the TIP project, or Technology Information Project. And that meant not only did we beta test all of Windows releases at that time, and I'll be dating myself by giving some examples, but we were actually the first dual platform network. So what does that mean? At that time, it meant you could have Windows computers and Mac computers, so PCs and Macs or Apples, on the same Windows NT kind of network at the same time. And those who operated the network, and at that time ran the cables and did everything that required administration, were the students. And I was a part of that program in high school. And I think it was 11th grade, I actually had the opportunity to go up to Canada and speak to the tourism of education, or the Minister of Education, the Minister of Education for the Canadian school system, on how to involve technology and students into public education. So that's really where I got started, and just kind of fell in love with the area, the idea, and the enablement that technology gave.
What an amazing story. And that makes so much sense. You're right. You were in the tech hub at the time with so many amazing companies there. That's brilliant. So let's fast forward to 2020. And, we have a lot of tools at our disposal, maybe not flying cars yet, but, they're probably not that far off. But when you think about women in leadership, what do you think about that? Let's look at it from a pre-pandemic position. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I think growing up and being involved in tech, I never really thought that gender would play a part or would be an issue that we'd still be facing. And as we looked at the progress of women sort of pre-pandemic, and particularly women in leadership at the beginning of 2020, so just before COVID started, we were in a position where the U.S. had been making slow but steady progress in the advancement of women into leadership positions. Between 2015 and 2020, looking at the McKinsey report that was done in 2020, the share of women grew from 23% in SVP roles to 28%, and from 17 to 21 in the C-suite. So we were definitely seeing advancements. So the numbers are still small, but they were improving. The challenge was women were still drastically underrepresented when you're at that position. That was a pretty good story coming into COVID, and a pretty good story for many of the companies. STEM industries, technology in particular, are an area where women are underrepresented and frankly paid less in that area. I'm proud to say Sabre, where I work, we are ahead of the curve. You heard some of the numbers that Mike started out the call with. For Sabre, in our workforce, we sit at over 38% of our overall workforce is female. and a third of our management positions are held by females, just over 33%. And actually, that first step into management is by far the hardest for women to achieve. And that's what we kind of refer to as the broken rung in the advancement of women, and something that we need to focus on. And that was a big area of focus for me to both educate and inform before we hit the COVID crisis.
That first rung is a really good observation. We could probably do a whole session.
We probably could
at a later time, but that's really insightful. Okay, so now we'll say we're in a post-COVID or COVID hit. What's happened since then? How has it impacted those leadership roles?
Well, I mean, obviously, COVID's had a profound impact on all of us personally, our societies, our economies, our industry. And it's certainly women in leadership and women advancement has not been insulated. It's actually been increasingly impacted by this. I think it underscores society's reliance on women, both in the front line and at home. And it's further exposed some of the structural inequalities that we have. So we're facing now, post-COVID, not just sort of some of these longstanding inequalities that we were making progress towards, but we're now in a position where COVID has impacted us to a degree that the last 6 years, we've essentially set back. We have essentially reset back to 2015 levels. If you look at the impact COVID has had, 3 million or nearly 3 million women have dropped out of the labor force this past year during the COVID crisis. And 1 in 4 women are still contemplating downshifting their careers or leaving the workforce entirely. Again, kind of underscoring that heavy reliance on women, both in the front line and at home. And to tip the scales even a little bit more, men are currently picking up jobs at 3 times the rate that women are leaving the workforce. And so that's kind of taking this challenge and saying, we were already behind, we were getting there and making some slow and steady progress. We just went back to 2015, so went back 6 years in the progress that we've made. But we're digging the hole deeper with the rate in which women are downshifting or considering downshifting or have already left, and the rate at which men are picking up those jobs. So there's no time better than now for us to start having these kind of conversations and to just be aware that this is a real challenge that's facing us. And I think that's why it's so great to GBTA continue to be focused on this and to have the declaration even at the WTTC, as you mentioned earlier.
Agreed. And I've heard you often speak about being an ally. Can you share what that means to you?
Yeah, it's this, I guess. An ally is any person that is, really actively promoting and aspires to advance the culture of inclusion through intentional, positive, and conscious effort to benefit. And so I think some people will say they're an ally when they are sort of a bystander, which is not exactly it. Being an ally, you really are actively promoting and you are advancing really intentionally a positive change in this area. And as I said, there's no time better than right now that we need to come together as an industry and as a society to support the advancement of inclusion, of diversity, and of equality. And I think it's always important when I talk about women in leadership and women advancement in technology or otherwise, this is not about the success of women at the cost of men. It is about attracting, retaining, recognizing, and promoting talent without a bias for gender. And sometimes that's uncomfortable for people, but what we see today is there is a bias for gender. Whether people like to admit it or acknowledge it, the numbers don't lie in telling that story. And so the ask here is not for preferential treatment, but instead to think about that attraction, retention, recognition, and promotion without a bias for gender. And, you certainly cannot argue with all the data that's out there about the benefits of having diverse leadership and inclusive leadership policies in your company.
Agreed. And I think we all play a role. Women, men, Sometimes there's a big focus on just women promoting other women, but men play, like you said, men play a key role as well, and in understanding how to not be biased as well.
Yeah, so absolutely.
I completely agree. So my final question for you is really just to give some insight to those listening in. I know you've got some key things, 6 things, I think, that you really feel women can do in their career to take it that next step forward. So I'd love for you to share those.
Yeah, there's this is something that some folks at Sabre and I worked on to just kind of talk about, what can I do? What can I walk away and do if I don't have the opportunity to speak in sessions? And other than being an ally or an advocate, as we talked about earlier, there's just a few little things that I advise many women to do. And first is just be involved. That is, ensure your HR professionals are providing diverse candidates and a diverse candidate pool at all levels of employment to find the most qualified person. When we started in 2020, management positions or leadership positions were held 62% by men, and women were promoted at a rate less than men. And that's, as I already said, exacerbated. We just have to make sure that we're examining what we represent in our executive teams, in our boards, in our candidate profiles, and that the hiring decisions that we make today at every level throughout our organizations are going to make an impact on the future of what E-teams look like, executive teams and C-suites look like. So be involved in being a part of that. The second is be informed, and never stop learning. I'm obviously passionate about this area. You are too. But whether it's attending industry conferences, listening to podcasts, reading books, we can always get more educated. And there's always new ways to think about and inform how we consider equality, diversity, inclusion, and taking those practices forward. I've several favorite books in this area, but one that I've read in the last kind of year or two has been a year and a half. I don't know. I feel like I've lost track of time during COVID. But I'll say the last year or two was How Women Rise. Marshall Goldsmith and Sally Helgeson, I think was her name. There's also an audio version of that. I know we're all crazy busy, but a great book on how women rise. So be informed and don't stop learning. The third is be selfish. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but focus on yourself in a good way. What do you need to be better? Do you need a coach? Do you need a mentor? Do you need to champion? It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. It matters that we are lifting others as we rise. And some people view that as selfishness. If I've moved up, if I've taken time out for myself to improve myself and move up, focus on that, because the more of us that move up, the more it's going to help future women to rise as well. But then lift others as you rise and mentor someone else. And it doesn't have to be a formal program. Each of us can make a difference in what we do for others. The fourth, I'd say, be connected. Be a support network. Join a group of individuals that allow you to keep doing well for yourself, but be connected with others. Sometimes there is a real challenge that can hit for many of us, which is I'm not good enough. I can't keep it all up. I'm not doing well enough. And we've particularly seen this during the COVID crisis with a lot of the weight of being at home full time, kids at home, families at home. I say build a support network, a group of individuals who can help you support and also have a realistic expectation of what needs to be done. Hey, I'm all about outsourcing. Like if you can outsource house cleaning or laundry or babysitting or grocery shopping, be connected to a network of individuals, of women who can help you think of ideas of ways to do that, to get connected and free up some of that time for the things that really are important. The fifth area is to be enthusiastic. Don't wait for International Women's Day. Don't wait for something specific, a month or a date to talk about this. If it's something you care about, if it's something that you or your sister or your child, your daughter is going to be impacted by in the future, be enthusiastic about it. Celebrate contributions and achievements of women in your company and recognize it throughout the year, being cognizant of this. And then finally, and kind of my biggest word for all the women listening is just be bold. Don't be afraid to be curious, to ask the tough questions, to speak up. And that also means standing up for yourself. I have a story I share about when I joined Sabre a little over 4 years ago now, that the job I was offered was Senior Vice President of non-air. And I know there's airline people who listen to that and go like, yeah, of course, that's what we call it. No one wants to be the leader of not something. Like, let's just think about it. No one wants to be on the team of not something. And it really bothered me. And so I made that clear and I spoke up. And we actually, at that point, had the ability to rename the team, to rethink. And that has taken on. It's not just about a title. It was actually about how the team identifies. It's about what we share in our earnings report today, that we are a team of lodging, ground, and sea in all of these other areas. So it may seem so little, but actually those bold statements and those bold things can be really scary at the time, but take the chance to speak up, and it really drives an empowerment for both yourself and for those that you lead.
I love it. I love it. And what an amazing personal story, Traci. Thank you so much for sharing that and encouraging all of us, men and women, yeah, right, to be bold. Don't settle for anything less than what you know your worth is valued at. And just some great insights. So thank you so much for your time today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It went really quick.
Yeah, it did. And back to you, Mike.
Thank you so much, ladies. Really appreciate that. The insights that you just shared with those points and the advice, I think, is going to be invaluable for both men and women alike, but especially younger women who are just entering the marketplace and trying to figure out what their path is going to be. So thank you. I will say that you aren't the only cool kid, though, with Microsoft Tips Project. When I was growing up, which was a little before you, we had the other big powerhouse in technology called Microfiche. So when I had to do my book reports and download newspaper articles, remember, before Microsoft, there was Microfiche.
Yeah, we will long live Microfiche. We will not forget that, Mike. Thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you to everybody for joining us again. Really great session. We're going to be back at this next month. If you know a woman in tech, please nominate her for this series. Also, we could do multiple women. I think we're going to be doing a panel next month for next month's session. So please reach out to me. If you have my email, great. If not, go out to LinkedIn. You can find me out there, and please support women in tech and everything that you do. So thank you, and have a good day, everyone.